Hey everyone, welcome back. I can't wait to show you guys this sketchbook. It was sent to me by LT Art. They're a company from Lithuania and they make all kinds of paper for art. And I will be leaving the link to their site in the description, but mostly you can find them in distributors like Blick and Cherries. I even found them sold online in Shopee here in the Philippines, so that's great. I think they're just easy to find. They also sent me a few art pads and sketchbooks, which you'll be seeing in my later videos. I just wanted to dedicate a whole other video for this stone book, which I just think is so gorgeous. The cover on this one is made from real stone, and I just love the texture on it. I love feeling it from time to time, and it's also not as heavy as you might think. It's just weighty enough for it to hold the very thick watercolor papers inside. The exposed spine, I just really love the look of it, and also the paper just lays flat so beautifully, so which is great for when you want to paint on both sides, and when you get to the middle of the sketchbook, sometimes that gets really hard. I also just seriously love the actual paper. It's pure cotton, so it handles water great, but it's also not too rough that I wouldn't want to sketch on it. You see me use some masking fluid after I added the initial layer of yellow to the painting, and it's just I use it to preserve just those highlights because I'm planning on adding really dark colors right next to them, so that just makes this easier. But I don't really recommend this masking fluid at all. I think it's too watery and it's very hard to lay down, but also it's just so thin that the brush actually just scrapes some of it off while you're painting, especially like what happened with her right eye. It came off with the brush, so it was just so frustrating. So I really had to be careful while I was doing the rest of the painting, which I think kind of just dismisses the whole point of masking fluids, which is supposed to make this part easier, but that didn't do that. This actually made me realize that there are bad masking fluids out there. Before, my main requirement was actually just that they had an applicator. Some other minor things it was easy for me to let slide. But now that I think about it, I should probably do an updated favorite art supplies video, because my preferences have also been updated since I've uploaded that. I've been painting so much more than before, so I think it's about time that I do that too. I tried to do a painting that would require a lot of layers. To be honest, I already did another painting for the first page on this same sketchbook, but that one didn't turn out the way I wanted. And not because of the paper, but it's more because it just did I didn't plan it that well. I'm planning on finishing that one. It just, for the sake of this video, I just did another painting that would not take me as much time to finish. But just the last one had lots and lots of layers on it, so I know that this paper would just handle all that water. And even with those many layers being so wet, this paper just barely buckled with that. And for this painting, it didn't buckle at all, not that I've noticed. I'm using watercolors from my Paul Rubens set, and I really love these. I just think that they're so clean and transparent that I could just layer and layer with them without eventually feeling like I'm scraping the watercolor on top of the paper. And I was able to play around with the different colors that I used to build up this portrait. So I started off with some greens and then added some reds on top, and then added just some more warm oranges for the warmer parts of her face. So with some papers they wouldn't hold up that well, but I have found that most cotton paper would handle this kind of layering really well. So it's not surprising that it does that. Now I'm going back to this painting. Everything just really worked well. I didn't feel like I was held back by my art supplies at all. And you just know that it's going good when you don't notice your art supplies. I think it's because watercolor papers especially are more expensive that I'm more lenient towards the kind of papers that I use, especially if I don't pay as much for them, if they're not as expensive. Like a good example is my Baohong watercolor paper, which is what I mostly just use. I use it the most often, but there are things that I always notice with it, especially when I'm starting to paint, is that the sizing on it is very strong. So it feels like it takes a while for me to work my water and paint on it before it becomes workable. I guess that's the right word. So I couldn't really use my softer watercolor brushes for it when I'm starting the painting. And on my Fabriano Artistico, which takes water really well and the sizing is also better, on that one it's not really that enjoyable to sketch on it because it's just so rough that it feels like I'm just sanding my pencils, so I don't sketch on it that much. But with this paper I didn't really notice any little things like that. Anything that would take me away from the painting zone. So I think that's just why I'm just having so much fun just layering my colors so that they melt, and they just melt into the paper really well. And sketching on it felt great. I actually enjoyed the sketching process on this one, which is something that I don't normally enjoy with most watercolor papers. But also, it's not just so smooth that the paint just runs across the paper without being and making it hard to control, which I also find with a lot of other hot pressed papers. So this one I'm not actually sure if it's hot pressed or cold pressed, so I'll send them an email and ask them about that. I'll keep you posted. So towards the end, while I was taking off my masking fluid, it's just also so hard because it was so thin that it was even hard for me to figure out where I laid them down before. If it was thicker, it would be easier for me to feel through them. And so I even tore a bit of my paper, which is so frustrating. And that's really on me because that happened before with the same masking fluid, so it was my fault for even using the same one. I don't think I should be saying a lot about this masking fluid at all because I'm pretty sure it was given to me as a freebie with my Bao watercolor sketchbook. But I would actually rather they didn't send it at all if it was just gonna ruin the painting. I just think it's a fair warning to anyone who buys the Bao sketchbooks that they might come with these and just not to use them. There are way better masking fluids that are only a little bit more expensive than this one, and they might be hard to take off, but at least they're thicker, and so it's easier to find them, so they would just peel off when you do take them off. And also just make sure that you find one with an applicator so it's easy to put on without ruining your brushes. Towards the end, I actually used some white gouache with my watercolors so that they become more opaque, and it's easier for me to just add white gouache than trying to mix the same colors with the gouache, because it's very hard to color match gouache and watercolors. So I just added white gouache to my watercolor mix, and I think that makes it easier. I was pleasantly surprised at how the paper texture just worked so well with the gouache, because usually when paper has a lot of texture like this, it just disrupts a lot of the flow when you're doing these kinds of brush strokes, and especially for very thin lines like I did with her eyes, that would have been really hard to do. But for this paper, it worked really well, and I'm so happy with that. I'm actually really happy with how the whole painting went overall. So yeah, that is it for this one. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will be seeing you again soon.